Tamara from mooglyblog.com, and in this video I'm going to be demonstrating how to crochet the Frog Squish, which is a free pattern you'll find on mooglyblog.com. Please go to the link in the description or simply go to your favorite search engine and type in Mooglyblog Frog Squish and the pattern should come right up. To make this pattern, I used 2 skeins of Bernat baby blanket in the green colorway. We also used a USL 8mm crochet hook. This one happens to be by Susan Bates. You also need just about a yard, honestly quite a bit less, but less than a yard, of worsted or medium weight yarn. Just to make this little smile, I used Bernat Maker Home Deck. We'll also, of course, need some filling. I used a 10-inch Microbead Pillow Ball, but you could use fiber fill if you prefer, as well as safety eyes and our standard crochet tools like stitch markers. Let's go ahead and get started making a frog squish together. The frog squish is crocheted all in one color with that little bit of extra black for the smile with just 2 safety eyes added. We do need, in addition to the Microbead Pillow Ball I forgot to mention before, a little bit of extra fiber fill for the eyes, or you can fill the whole thing with fiber fill if you prefer. The body itself is the same basic instructions found in all the squishes. Starting with the octopus squish, you can see how we begin in a half double crochet spiral, worked from the top down, and then in the bottom, you can see right here, is pretty much the same as the top. We just stop a little bit earlier and we attach those feet as we go. Again, you can see this in some of the other squish patterns. The things that are different about the frog squish are these little eye bumps right here and the feet themselves. Now, if I flip them up here, hopefully you can see these feet come in 2 different sizes. We've got longer legs for the back legs or back feet and shorter ones for the front feet. They're the same, all except for 1 row. So in this video, I will show you how to do the feet as well as the eyeballs. After you've sewn the eyeballs to the body, added the smile, and added the feet to the belly, then right there, you can see if you look very closely, is a whip stitch seam, seaming the belly to the body itself. The eyes themselves, after we make them, we be sure to add the safety eye, then fill it up with fiber fill, and then you can use your stitch markers to attach it to the body itself and sew it down carefully using the end of yarn. As long as it's in the same color, I can assure you this is not fancy stitching. It will not show. In the written instructions, I've included where exactly to lay these out. It looks like it's about rounds 4 through 7 or so on either side of the center start there. Of course, the smile is located right in between the eyes, and then we want to do our best to line up the feet with the head. So let's go ahead and get started making some of these parts. So let's make the eyes for our frog squish. Of course, we need to make 2. Both of them are identical, and they both start with the magic circle. I'm going to come in several inches from the end of the yarn and go over the first finger of my non-hook hand twice. Once, twice, towards me, just like a yarn over. Then I insert my hook under both of those loops. I use the hook portion of my hook to grab that strand that's a little further back, pull it to the front. You can see how I have the other ends secured in my hand here. Yarn over and pull a loop through. This sort of locks it together, but I still like to go ahead and chain 1. And then we start stitching into the ring itself. Now with each stitch, I want to make sure that I go under the ring that goes all the way around my finger and under this tail end here. Pulling on that tail end is what will turn it into a magic ring and close up our circle. But it only works if we crochet over it. So to continue on with round 1 for our eyes, after we chain 1, we single crochet into the ring. Again, make sure we go under both those loops. And then you can go ahead and pull your finger out. That first stitch really locks it together. Now at this point, because we are working in a spiral, just like when we do the body and the belly, I like to put a stitch marker in the first stitch of each round. This really helps me keep track so I don't lose my place. Anytime we're working in a spiral, we don't have that jog between joins, so it's very easy to lose your place if you don't use your stitch markers. Let me pull that loop down to size here. There we go. So after that single crochet, we then work 7 half double crochets into the ring. So it will be a total of 8 stitches. So we go right in there for our first one. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you can see how it's curving around here in our circle, 6, and 7. So that should give us a total of 8 stitches, but it's always a good idea to go back and count, especially when the numbers are low. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 stitches total. Oop, get that loop on the right way here. When we pull down on our working yarn, we always want the strand in front of the hook to be the one that pulls back down into the stitch. There we go. So now we are done with round 1. We just need to pull down on that tail to tighten up our magic circle here. So I'm going to go ahead and just pull that tail out and give it a nice little tug. Now, I'm going to pull that loop up a little bit here and set my hook aside. As I do this, I like to keep sort of my other fingers on top of that gather there, so I can sort of feel as it's pulling together. And if something stops you, if you can't pull this through, don't pull too hard or the yarn will break. You can always go back and use this tail end and your yarn needle to cinch up that hole at the end when you weave in your ends before you assemble your amigurumi. It's better to do that than break the yarn. If you break the yarn, you're probably going to have to start over. So now that it's all gathered up into our first round here, I can go ahead and put my hook right back in. There we go. And that is what it looks like at the end of round 1. For round 2 of our frog eyes, we're going to be putting 2 half double crochets in each stitch around. Since we had 8 stitches in round 1, that means we'll have 16 stitches in round 2. Now remember, we're working in a spiral, so we're not going to slip stitch to that first stitch. We just go ahead and start working straight into it. Again, this is the same way we make the body and the belly, just with a slightly different stitch count. Now that we've worked a stitch into that first stitch, we want to go ahead and move that stitch marker on up to our new first stitch of the round. And then, of course, we need to go back and put a second one right in that same stitch. There we go. So there's 2 stitches in the first stitch. And I go to the next stitch and do 2 stitches in there, 2 half double crochets. There's 1 and 2. There we are. And we just keep doing that all the way around for round 2. Make sure you put 2 half double crochets in each stitch for a total of 16, and I'll see you when we're ready for round 3. So here we are at the end of round 2 of the eyes, and you can see how it's starting to cup up towards me a little bit. We're making our eyes from the outside, so at this point, or whenever you feel comfortable, you can just go ahead and flip it around like that. Now we're working from the outside of the eye. We didn't really turn or anything, we just have to flip it so it's right side out here. Rounds 3 and 4 of the eyes are exactly the same. We simply half double crochet in each stitch around. And here you can see at the end of round 2 just how important it was to have that stitch marked. Otherwise, I could just keep crocheting. So as we go into this one right here, we're going to do 1 stitch in each stitch around for rounds 3 and 4. So I always want to make sure to move that stitch marker up to the new first stitch of each round. Whoops. There we go. Let me get that in there better. There we go. So now we can simply half double crochet in each stitch all around. We aren't increasing at all, so we'll still have 16 half double crochets in each round. And even though we're not increasing or anything, we're still working in a spiral, so you do not want to join at the end of this round. Just keep working around for round 3, then move your stitch marker up again as you make round 4, and I will see you as we're ready to finish up our eyes. So here we are through round 4 of the eyes. You can see when we turn it upside down how we get that great shape. So for round 5, we just have a few stitches to finish it up and get rid of this jog. We're going to single crochet in the next stitch, which is our marked stitch. And you can mark that if you want to, but you don't really need to anymore. We can just go ahead and set that aside. So after we single crochet, then we slip stitch in the next stitch. And then we're going to break our yarn and do a seamless join in the next stitch, but we want to make sure to leave a long tail for sewing. We're going to use this long tail left at the end of our eye here to sew it on to our body, because why not do that and then save ourselves an extra end or 2 to weave in. So when I have to cut a long tail for sewing, sort of my rule of thumb is to go around where I need the seam to be about 3 times. That usually gives me more than enough yarn for sewing. Now, if you're making this in a thinner yarn, something smaller, you might want to give yourself some more length, simply because it's going to be a little bit easier to handle. So for smaller pieces, I might cut a little bit longer, but in general, this seems to be a good rule of thumb. You can see here is where we're going to be sewing right along that last row. So we just take our yarn and sort of just lay it right along that last row. You can see I'm not, overly careful with it or anything. 3 times around seems to usually be plenty. So we just go ahead and cut our yarn there, and that will give us enough length to sew our eye on with. So to do that seamless join, I'm going to go ahead and just pull up after the slip stitch so that the yarn is pulled on through. And then I need to put this hook somewhere where it will stop rattling around. There we go. And pull up a yarn needle. This could be any sort, bent tip, not bent tip, does not matter in the least. Just make sure it's big enough to get your yarn through here. So we put our yarn end on our needle. We find the very next stitch. You can see that right there is where we slip stitched into. So here's the next stitch. We take our yarn needle, we go under both of those top 2 loops, just like we would with a hook. Pull that loop through. You can see the length of that loop is about the length of the V of a top of a stitch here. We go right back down in the center, or you could say under the back loop of the previous stitch, the one this strand is coming out of. And when we pull that through and adjust it to size, you can see that gives us a really nice sloped edge. So now we can take that end and sew it onto the body. But before we do that, we want to go ahead and add the safety eye, which I recommend you do through the center of a stitch. That's going to help hold it in place really well and keep it from moving around like it could if you put it between stitches. You want to put it right through the center of a stitch, and then add just a little bit of fiber fill before you sew it on to give it some nice bounce. Now it's time to make the feet for our frog squish. We make 2 of the front feet and 2 of the back feet. So let's begin by making the front feet. We're going to start by chaining 6. So that means we need to put a slip knot on our hook. There we go. Oops. Get that settled down there to the right size. And then chain 6. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now, when I work into chains, I prefer to work into the underneath hump rather than the front or back loop, but you can work into whichever part you like. That said, I do think it gives a nicer edge for this piece if you work into that back hump instead. So after we've chained, we're going to skip the chain closest to the hook and then work a cluster in the next chain. Now, cluster is sort of a generic term in crochet. It can mean several things, so it's always important to check the special stitches for a pattern. If you see something like a cluster, it should be defined at the beginning of the pattern. For this pattern, it's essentially a double crochet 2 together, but with both legs worked into 1 stitch, so it's not a decrease. So we've skipped the stitch closest to the hook. We're going to yarn over, go into the next stitch, yarn over and pull up our loop, yarn over and pull through 2. We have 2 loops left on the hook here, yarn over again, go right back into that same stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2. Now we've got 3 loops left on the hook. We just yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. So for this pattern, that is how you make the cluster. Then we single crochet in the next chain, right there. And as we do that, you can see how the cluster wants to push out towards the back. We actually want to push it towards us. So just give it a little push with your fingers there. If you make the single crochet in the next stitch nice and tight, that should stick out really nice and roundly. After that, we cluster in the next stitch again. So we go to the next stitch, yarn over, pull through 2, stop with 2 loops left on the hook, yarn over, same stitch. Work it till there's 3 loops left on the hook, yarn over and pull through all 3. Now we single crochet in the next stitch again. So as we do that, we can kind of push that cluster forwards towards us. Get in nice and tight for that single crochet. You can see how nicely that really bounces out. After that single crochet, then we have just 1 cluster left here in this very last chain. So we go right in there, we begin it, stop with 2 loops on the hook, yarn over, go back in, pull up our loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2. Now, we can see we've got cluster, single crochet, cluster, single crochet, cluster. At the end of the row, after you cluster in that last chain, we're going to chain 1 and then slip stitch in the bottom of that chain as well. And again, we want to try and push as best we can that cluster out towards us. If it insists on going the other way, you can just push it out after you get the slip stitch done. But we've got the cluster, chain 1, go right back in that same stitch. You can see mine wants to push towards the back. That's okay. We're just going to slip stitch right in there and then push that cluster back forward. So these are going to make the 3 toes at the end of all our feet. Both the front feet and the back feet start out the same way. So there we have the end of row 1. It's officially a row at this point, but it's about to become rounds. So for round 2, we start with a chain 1, and then we're going to single crochet in the bottom of each of those 5 stitches, the cluster, the single crochet, cluster, single crochet, cluster. We want to single crochet in the base of each of these. Now these feet, unlike the rest of the squish, are not worked in the round. So you can choose to use stitch markers here if you want to, but you certainly don't have to. There's a single crochet in the bottom of that first cluster. I'm going to go ahead and put a stitch marker in there, I think. I've never regretted using them, but I've often regretted not using them. So after we mark our first stitch, then we single crochet in the rest of those stitches across. There's 2. The third one should be in the bottom of the middle cluster. 4 in the bottom of that next single crochet, and then the 5th one in the bottom of this cluster here. Then we're going to single crochet in the turning chain way back here. Remember, we skipped that last chain we made and worked in the next chain. We want to single crochet right in there, so kind of right in the side. There we go. We keep turning it around, and now we're going to single crochet in the next 5 stitches. So that would be the tops of these 5 stitches. So make sure you get to the top of that cluster. So there's 1, and then in the single crochet for 2, top of the next cluster for 3, top of the next single crochet for 4, pull up a little bit more yarn if we need to, there we go, single crochet in the top of that last cluster. And now what we want to do is single crochet right back there in that chain 1. Remember, we made the last cluster chain 1 and slip stitched the base. We're just going to go right into that chain 1 right there. There we go. So now we've made a total of 12 single crochets, worked all the way around, and because this one isn't a spiral, we're going to join with a slip stitch. So that is what it should look like for your front and back feet at the end of round 2. Now we're ready for round 3 of our feet. We start again with a chain 1, and then we're going to go right into a single crochet 2 together. So let me get that stitch marker on out of the way here. We go right into that first stitch, pull up a loop, go into the second stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull through all 3 loops. You can go ahead and mark this first stitch again if you like. After that, we then single crochet in the next stitch. And then that's our repeat. Single crochet 2 together, single crochet. Let's do it. Single crochet 2 together, you go into the next stitch, pull up a loop, then the following stitch and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through all 3 loops, single crochet in the next. We need to do that pairing 2 more times. Go to the next stitch, pull up a loop, next stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through all 3 for a single crochet 2 together, single crochet in the next stitch. So now we should have just 3 stitches left. We single crochet 2 together over the next 2, and then single crochet in the very last stitch. Now, if you'd like, if this slip stitch here is going to start confusing you, you can go ahead and also put a stitch marker in the last stitch of the round. That way you won't get mixed up by seeing the slip stitch in there, because we do need to slip stitch that very first single crochet 2 together. There we are, to finish up round 3. So at the end of round 3 on your little foot, you should have a total of 8 stitches. So now we're ready for round 4, but before you go any further, I do recommend that you go ahead and weave in that first end. After that, we can continue on. Round 4 is simply chain 1 and single crochet in each stitch around. Since we had 8 stitches in the previous round, you should have 8 stitches at the end of round 4. And then we simply join again with a slip stitch. So I'll see you at the end of round 4. So this is what your foot should look like after round 4. For round 5, we start with a chain 1 and single crochet in the first stitch. So I'll go ahead and move that stitch marker right on up to our new first stitch here. There we go. And then after that, we are going to single crochet 2 together, just as we did before. Go into the next stitch and pull up a loop, go into the next stitch and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through all 3. Then we single crochet in the next 2 stitches. So there's 1 and 2. And then we single crochet 2 together in the next 2 stitches. Go into the next stitch, pull up a loop, stitch after that, pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through all 3. Oops, got caught on that last stitch marker there. Go ahead and move that one out of the way because now we just need to single crochet in that very last stitch. There we are. Go ahead and mark that if you like. And then join again with our slip stitch in our first stitch there. So at the end of round 5, you should have a total of 6 stitches. There we go. You can see this is what your foot should look like. Now, for the front foot, we move on to round 6, where we flatten these 2 rows, or I should say the 2 halves of this row, and single crochet through both halves. For the back feet, we've got one more round before that, one more round 6, if you will, where we simply chain 1 and single crochet all the way around, just like we did in round 4. That's the only difference between the front and the back feet. The back feet have one more round at this point, worked even. After that, they both have the same way to finish. What we're going to do is, like I said, sort of fold this flat. Now you can see it's already wants to be flat, so there's not a whole lot of folding to do here, but we want to single crochet through both of these layers. There are 6 stitches here, so we'll have 3 stitches when we get to the end of this row. So let's go ahead and do it together here. Let me get my hook back in our loop. There we go. And now we start with a chain 1. It's already sort of folded for us. That's the way it wants to be. We're going to insert our hook in the first stitch and the last stitch, but we just go straight through the fabric, just like that. You can see, because of my stitch markers, it's really easy. I've got my first stitch and my last stitch marked, and I just put my hook all the way through. Let me show that one more time. We'll come from the top this time. I've got that chain 1. You can see here's our foot. My first stitch and my last stitch are marked. I just go right through, right into that first stitch, and then right through the fabric through that last stitch. Now, at this point, I want to go ahead and move my stitch markers aside. I don't need those anymore. I can yarn over and pull my loop all the way up and through both of those layers and finish my single crochet. So there's the first one. Then I want to do the same thing in the next 2 stitches. Go right through the fabric. So now I'm in the second stitch and the second to last stitch. Pull up our loop and finish our single crochet. That gives us 2 stitches here, the 2 middle stitches, right on the end. We just want to get our hook all the way through both of those stitches and finish our single crochet. Then at this point, we can go ahead and break our yarn. We don't need to leave a long tail on the feet. They get stitched into the belly. So we can go ahead and just finish those right off. So here you can see the feet of our frog squish. You can see how the longer one is just longer by that one last round of single crochets, adding a little bit of extra length. In the written instructions, you'll see exactly where to attach these to the belly. The belly starts the same as the top. We just work out in those spiral rounds. Then we attach our feet with some stitch markers, and just like we single crocheted through both layers of our feet, we'll crochet through the single crochet of the foot, and then behind it, the belly stitch as we make that last round of the belly, and we'll be all set up to join it to our body. It's just that simple. The frog squish is probably the simplest of all the squishes on Moogly. And that's how to crochet the frog squish. Remember, you can substitute any kind of Bernat blanket for Bernat baby blanket. They're all the same, as long as they're the 6 weight. So you can pick your favorite green in Bernat baby blanket or Bernat blanket, whichever you prefer. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.